Hey YouTube, it's TyrantGod. Has it been 2 weeks already since I accepted that challenge from my friend? Yes, and then some. It's been almost 2 months. Originally my challenge my friend gave me was to paint a Adeptus Mechanicus Archaeopter within about 2 weeks or so for reasons. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make that deadline. As you can see here, I've soaked it because of me missing that deadline in isopropyl alcohol to get a new clean start. So instead of that Archaeopter, I have planned to do pink horrors from my Tzeentch Daemon Start Collecting box. So let's dive on in on that. Now, instead of using the airbrush that I was trying out, or to use a color palette, with basic water and stuff, I'm actually going to be trying a glazing technique with a wet palette and this Vallejo thinner. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put a link below, but I actually saw a YouTuber named Dana Howell doing this, and I think she explains it really well. I'm not, of course, giving an instruction step by step, just kind of mimicking some of the things that she did very poorly. So if you want to see how it's actually done, I'm going to go ahead and put the link below for that. Now, what I went ahead and did is I started with a zenithal highlight, and essentially that just allows you to simulate light being on an object. And for glazing, it's perfect because with glazing, you're putting on these really thin coats, so it really takes advantage of this essentially free shading that you're doing. And just so you guys know, I'm not going to be painting the base of this model or the skull. The reasoning being I haven't really decided on a base for my Tzeentch army as of right now. I'm also going to be using a different camera angle, as you can see. Let me know what you guys think about this adjusted angle on here, and if you guys would like me to keep it this way or possibly try a different one over the course of this video. Before we even get started with this glazing, I'm actually going to go ahead and use some Nuln oil from Citadel, and it's a wash, and I'm going to go ahead and just place it on like ink on a brush to really kind of emphasize some certain textures on this model on a zenithal highlight that might have been faded a bit from the white itself. And as you can see when I'm done here, it really helps this model pop quite a bit more before we even have gotten to the glazing process. So the first paint I use for this glazing process is Citadel's layer paint, the Emperor's Children. It's a strong pink because we're doing pink horrors. And then for every other glaze that we're doing, I'm also adding a 2:3 ratio of Vallejo's Glaze Medium. So 3 glaze droplets to 1 paint droplet. And you want to thin this out, get it nice and thin, so that way you're putting nice light strokes of paint on here. That's barely going to make a difference. We're slowly glazing and layering this up, and I made kind of a rookie mistake and didn't put any water in my palette initially. So just if you notice that, definitely make sure there's some water in your wet palette, because that's why it's a wet palette. I got too excited and just rushed into it. I'd like to take this moment while I'm getting this glaze ready to go to thank my solo Patreon supporter Clem. He's been around for quite a while. I'll definitely have to do something special for him. But if you're interested in sharing your creations, whether you're new or a veteran, and you want to hang out with us, for $2 a month, you can join my 1000 Gears Discord community I'm building up. And we'd love to see you and see what you got. And if you got any new ideas for me, let me know. As you can see here though, I went ahead and finished up the rest of the model. It's not going to look super impressive at the start or at the end, but it's a good start for me anyways. Next up, I just start doing the same thing on the end of the tentacles and tail with Stegadon Scale Green, another Citadel paint. And I want to make it kind of shift into like a blended blue to kind of indicate that there's going to be some splitting here eventually for the blue horrors that I will also eventually do on here. Now, after I do the first layer of this pink and Stegadon color, I'm actually going to go ahead and do a second layer, and you'll see the post results of that right after the first one, and you'll see that it's already starting to darken up quite a bit. Now, I bought these drop top toppers at my local game store. If you don't want to switch over your paints to entirely new droppers to get accurate measurement, or worse yet, guess how much paint you're using in your ratios, I definitely recommend these. They are a little bit more on the expensive side, but with the silicone, you just squeeze out exactly how much you need, and I think they're incredibly convenient.
Drop Top, please sponsor me.
Now I'm going to go ahead and work on applying the third layer at this point onto my horror. Really take it away from that pale end and bring it up to the actual pink that it's supposed to be. And I think it's turning out really well at this point, really taking shape. It definitely requires a lot of patience for this kind of thing. And then afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and go back to doing the blue and doing the best blend I possibly can. Though I think at the end of the video, kind of when I do a little bit of the showcasing, you'll see my blend's a little bit off, but it is, to be fair, my first time doing blends. So, let me know what you guys think, if it's okay for the first time or terrible. It's terrible. It's bad. But yeah, anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up this third layer here. Now once I have that third layer on there, I go ahead and start with the tongue. Now I could do a typical tongue coloration of like blue with the horrors, but again, I want to have mine set up a little bit differently. For example, the pink horrors, they belch out coruscating flames, and so I imagine my Tzient's flames to be green and blue and maybe a little dash of purple. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the base of my horse tongue as the mustard yellow or Averland sunset Citadel color yellow, and I'm gonna go ahead and glaze that on there, and I'm gonna go ahead and glaze after that some Warpstone glow, another layer paint, and at the very end I'm gonna use Phoenician purple to kind of give it that end edge that I would do with the flames, where it's starting to develop into like soot or something like that. There was a few other things I wanted to try out with some technical paints, but I think for now I'm going to kind of leave this be and kind of enjoy it as it is, and maybe down the road I might add that on there. Now after I do 2 layers on that tongue, I'm going to go ahead and go back onto the main body of the model and use matte white. I only have Army Painter's matte white. White Scars was out from Citadel, but it doesn't matter, white paint is white paint. And I'm going to highlight parts of the body that are keynotes of interest before my 4th and final glaze layer that I'm doing. Now, again, I really recommend looking at Dana Howell's video. She does a really good job explaining how to do this and why. And obviously her glazing is just much better. So after this, definitely check that out. You'll kind of see what I was trying to do. But essentially, I'm just trying to highlight key areas, glaze over it, so I can get edge highlights of the same coloration range or shade. Now after highlighting that area and putting another layer on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and actually get a wash here, and that's called Carroburg Crimson, another Citadel shade. And I'm going to go ahead and darken up some of the crevasses and shadowy areas. Same idea with brightening up the highlights. I'm going to do the same thing by going into those crevices, and darkening those up a bit. transition, and I started using Vallejo's liquid gold. More specifically, it's green gold. And I want to try out some new metallics, and I really like this one. As a note, you have to shake it up a lot because it has actual metal particles inside of it. And additionally, make sure you use isopropyl alcohol like I did to clean the brush, because that's what it requires. And upon using this, I found my best result is after shaking it up to immediately dip my brush where there weren't any bubbles by tilting it to get the richest sample onto my model. Otherwise, it would kind of be really faded and glossy, and it just didn't look quite right. So for me personally, after shaking it up with some little ball bearings inside of it, tilting it, dipping it, and immediately applying and doing that every time. Otherwise, again, it just looks kind of faded. Otherwise, it looks fantastic. After doing the gold, I move on to the claws and the teeth. I retouch them up with some white and then give it a little bit of Screaming Skull from Citadel. I'm actually just doing the standard water and paint, not really messing too much with the glaze here, and touching those up. Then I use the Seraphim Sepia wash from Citadel to age the claws just a little bit. And then I go on top of it again with the Screaming Skull, and then finally the white to highlight those to kind of really make them stand out. The last touches we're gonna do on this model, for me personally, is to get the eyes. Now with Tzeentch, originally I was thinking with my models I'd do like a green or something, but honestly I think the yellow eyes are far too iconic. So I go ahead and do the base of them with a very, very, very fine brush with Averland Sunset. Don't really wet it down or anything like that. Maybe just a tiny bit of water, but not much because I don't want it running everywhere. If it does, just use a brush to kind of soak up some of it. And then I go ahead and touch it up just a little bit more on each of the eyes with Flash Gitz yellow to really make that brighten up and pop. I'm going to go ahead and call that a wrap on my pink core for my Tzeentch army. It's going to be the standard I'm basically doing for these models. On top of that, it's my first time doing a glazing method, and I actually have a third method I'm planning on doing, or a style per se, for my third army, and look forward to that next video. And the way you can do that is by subscribing to my channel, typical plug there, right at the end, or just leave a comment, let me know what you thought about what I did. But until the next video, I'll see you guys later.